Hi guys, when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, he surrounded himself with the greatest of minds. People like Nadine Dorries, Matt Hancock, James Cleverly and Liz Truss. Well, Liz Truss is likely to take over from Johnson next month and seems to be doing pretty much the same job. One of her economic advisor, it seems, is a man called Patrick Minford, who once upon a time worked for Margaret Thatcher. He has made predictions in the past, one being that Brexit would boost the UK economy by 7%. It's currently falling by 4%. Well, the investment bank Citigroup issued a prediction for inflation next year hitting 18.6%, but Patrick has different ideas.
Well, there's many elements at the moment going on in the projections of prices. First of all, commodity prices are now starting to fall, and gas prices, we've no idea what they'll be.
Well, I don't have an idea of how much they'll be, and you don't know how much they'll be, but the analysts are predicting gas prices rising. Now, I'm not sure which commodities he's talking about dropping here, but when it comes to the predictions and when it comes to rising energy prices, the analysts are talking about them rising next year, not dropping.
Of course, that's possible. They could be very high, in which case this could happen. Obviously, we just don't know at this point exactly what the commodity environment will be like.
So if inflation were to soar to such eye-watering levels, would you then think that, tens of billions of pounds of taxpayers' money should be spent on what Liz Truss called, rather dismissively, handouts to help people through the winter?
Well, you need to factor in the fact that benefits for households that are on benefits will be indexed to inflation.
What? They're not indexed to inflation, unless he's making some sort of prediction here or suggesting that they should be indexed to inflation. Household benefits are not indexed to inflation. They're not rising in line with inflation, unless I'm misunderstanding what he means here.
So the question will be whether they'll be indexed sufficiently in time to deal with the costs. And there's a case, obviously, for bringing forward the indexation in real time.
Well, let's zero in on the tax cuts that are being proposed by Liz Truss, because the Sunak team says that it's impossible to deliver tax cuts and help with energy bills on the scale that Liz Truss has promised without, and I quote, increasing borrowing to historic and dangerous levels, putting the public finances in serious jeopardy and plunging the economy into an inflation spiral. Former Cabinet Minister Michael Gove has said that Liz Truss has taken a holiday from reality. Your response to those two quotes?
Well, this is absolute nonsense, in fact. I mean, we are a major state with a major economy, and we are able to borrow on international markets.
Now, what's interesting here is he says international markets, not domestic markets. But most borrowing, as far as I know, is within domestic markets. And if the central bank, the Bank of England, is increasing interest rates, it will make it more expensive for the UK government to borrow. Now, he'll go on to say in a moment how it's really cheap to borrow at the moment. Maybe on international markets, but most borrowing, as far as I know, and do correct me in the comment section if I'm wrong, but most borrowing is internal. It's within the UK. And it's not a good choice at the moment to buy UK debt within the country.
At extraordinarily low interest rates. So, of course, we have to observe fiscal rectitude, and that means in the long run, the debt ratio has got to be brought down to normal sorts of levels that are set.
Notice he didn't answer the question. He was asked, should some handouts be delivered to people? And he didn't answer the question. He started talking about benefits, and he talked about borrowing. But if you are to deliver some sort of package, some sort of stimulus package, you'll probably have to borrow. Liz Truss, if she becomes Prime Minister, will have to borrow. She's not going to cut taxes to a level that's actually going to help people. it's likely that she'll have to borrow billions of pounds. Now, where she's going to borrow it from remains to be seen. Is it going to be internal markets or international markets?
Safe, and that I think there's every prospect of doing. And so there's absolutely no reason to say we can't borrow. I mean, the role of government is to borrow as necessary to fund its operations in particularly deal with shocks. And so to say that, I mean, after all, this comes pretty weirdly from a bunch of ministers that just borrowed 500 billion to deal with the pandemic.
But aside
So
from
the
the
idea
borrowing,
we can't borrow is nonsense.
But aside from the borrowing, tax cuts would fuel inflation, wouldn't they? Because you're putting money back into people's pockets, presumably to try and to persuade them to spend money, and that would fuel inflation.
No, that's not true. You know, if you actually cut people's taxes, that reduces their need for higher wages, and so.
What? Is he truly suggesting that the tax cuts that Liz Truss will bring in will eliminate people's request for higher wages? We're talking about tax cuts that will benefit people on the lower end of the scale to the value of about £1 a week or £1 a month. I don't remember exactly. Maybe it's let's be generous here at £1 a week, and people on the higher end maybe something like £30 a week. So does he honestly believe, say, that the government would say to people, here's £1 a week extra, now you don't need a pay increase? Yes, but inflation is running at 18.6%. Yes, but £1 a week will cancel that out. Is he insane?
That's a supply side boost, which actually reduces inflation.
Given that you've said...
So he thinks this... So giving people £1 a week and advising them not to ask for higher wages will actually reduce inflation. No, this will bring on a recession. And then the recession will reduce inflation.
The direct opposite of Rishi Sunak, who, you know, was Chancellor until very recently, when he talked about tax cuts fueling inflation. Has he misunderstood basic economics? What's going on there?
Well, I don't think his economics on this is quite right. You know, I think what makes sense in terms of economic management is having a supportive fiscal policy that is related to the business cycle, while at the same time the Bank of England is tasked with the job of keeping monetary conditions so as to bring down inflation.
People are finding these predictions of 18.6% inflation, you know, frankly terrifying. Tory MP supporting Rishi Sunak says, you know, people will end up on the streets if any of this is likely to come to pass. Your view, you seem to be thinking that people are panicking.
I think that given the powers that the government has through fiscal policy and through taxes and benefits to assist the economy, the idea that British citizens are going to go berserk is frankly insulting to them.
Professor.
Okay. Well, he doesn't believe that there's going to be any sort of real crash. He's been wrong before. As I said at the beginning of this, he said that Brexit, he's a Brexiteer, he said that Brexit would boost the economy by 7 or 8%. I think it was 7%, when in reality, Brexit is doing twice as much damage as the pandemic is doing. And we can see it, you know, almost every day. But what is Liz Truss going to do? Well, she'll likely have to try and borrow money if she is to provide some sort of stimulus plan. And these tax cuts are not going to really make a dent on the cost of living crisis, because it's not going to bring down inflation. Not directly. It will do nothing to stop a recession. And it's likely that a recession is what will bring down the inflation rate, because people won't have any money. They don't have much money now, and if they don't receive a stimulus package, then they'll have even less. And you're going to start to see businesses closing, as you're seeing at the moment. It's just going to ramp up, and you're going to see a situation also where wages are going to drop. This is why it's very important at the moment that trade unions get whatever agreements they can with their employers that wages are protected or increase. Because what's going to happen is when there's a recession, there's going to be mass unemployment, and then unions will be in a very weak position to negotiate wages, because the employers will say, well, we can just bring in people. There's a queue of people we can bring in to do the same job. So if there's a glut of workers available, it will drive down wages. So you're going to see wages drop during a recession. And I don't think Liz Truss is even thinking about this if she's speaking to people like Patrick Minford, who don't seem to think a recession is on the horizon. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.